And we're doing What Is It Like to Be a Bat by Thomas Nagel. So before I actually get into the paper, I want to talk a little bit about reductionism, because half of Nagel's conclusion revolves around this theory of reductionism. So reductionism is a relationship between theories. It's a way of explaining higher level phenomenon by reducing the phenomenon to its lower level components. So it's a methodology that advanced the explanatory and predictive power of scientific theories. So there are a couple examples. Heat can be reduced to molecular motion, so thermodynamics to mechanics. There are not two kinds of phenomena in the world, motion and heat. There's just one kind. Heat is the motion. So heat is explained as motion and is nothing more than motion. So we have this higher level, the heat we feel and detect, and then the lower level is the motion that we can't detect. And so this higher level phenomenon is reduced to this lower level. In chemistry, we have the periodic table of elements. So elements can be reduced to the number of electrons, the valence. So the number of outer shell electrons in each element explains the nature and the distribution of the elements in the periodic table. So chemistry can be reduced to atomic physics. And then in biology, the example, we have genetics. So we have these two laws of independent assortment and segregation, and it's dependent on genes. And what's a gene? Genes are DNA, or genes can be reduced to DNA. So genetics is reducible to molecular biology. So this is a higher level process, biological trait transmission, explained by lower level process of nucleic acids. So throughout the entire history of science, scientific progress has been made by attempting to reduce this phenomenon. So these higher levels to these lower levels. And this reduction has two goals. One is to enhance understanding of the higher level phenomena. And the second is to increase the precision of this higher level phenomena. Increasing the precision with which we can measure the variables at the higher level. And after understanding reduction, we can develop new operational definitions by indirectly measuring the lower level phenomena. And so a couple videos back, I talked a lot about temperature, and this is something that we were able to come up with this operational definition, and we learned a lot from that operational definition, and that helped us with the reduction model of science. Okay, so how is this relevant? It's relevant to the overarching discussions we've been having about the mind and the body, but also Nagel's argument. I'll talk about Nagel's argument later, probably the last video, but if science is reducible, completely reducible, then physicalism follows. So the idea here is that we have neuroscience, which is the study of the brain, and that hopefully a lot of neuroscientists want to say is reducible to biology. And then the biology is going to be reducible to chemistry. Chemistry is going to be reducible to physics. So ultimately, neuroscience should be reducible to physics. And if that's the case, then our minds, totally explained by neuroscience, should be reducible to physics. So our minds could be reduced to physics. Physics is entirely physical processes going on down there. So that would mean that if our minds are reducible to physics, then our minds are also physical entities. You can't reduce a non-physical thing to something that's physical. And reductionism has been a methodology has been extremely powerful in unifying science. So fundamental science is physics, and chemistry has been built upon physics. Biology is built on chemistry. So we have this kind of science hierarchy going on. And when I say neuroscience of the mind, I'm also talking about cognitive science and psychology. All of it should be under this physicalist picture of the world, reducible to biology, then chemistry, then physics. And yeah, so the idea here is that physicalism implies that mental states are just physical processes, neurological processes. So neurological processes are supposed to be just molecular biology is chemistry is just physics. Now, Nagel's point here is that this reductionism is never going to happen. So of course he's not going to say like, yeah, it's going to happen, then the story would be over, this lecture would be over. No, he's saying no matter how wonderful reductionism fits into the scientific picture, it's always going to fail when we apply it to psychology. That reductionism cannot give us an improved understanding of one very important part of psychology, which is our consciousness. Our consciousness is not reducible to, Nagel was going to say anything. So it's not that we haven't figured out yet how to reduce it, or that we're not smart enough. We just need to learn more and then we'll be able to reduce it. And it's not that neuroscience is just in its infancy and still needs time to grow and then we'll be able to figure out how to reduce it. No, Nagel has an extremely strong claim here, and he says that it will never be reducible because there is a conceptual barrier to the reduction of consciousness to physical processes. And because it's a conceptual barrier, it's not a matter of our human limitations. It's a matter of the actual what it is, what consciousness is, and what reductionism entails. So what is consciousness? So this is the definition that Nagel gives. There are many, many other attempts at definitions of consciousness. So it's not like this is the definition, but this is the one he gives. And he has what I think are good reasons for this definition. So the definition, some person P has conscious states if and only if there is something that it is like to be P. So what does this mean? And it is this definition of consciousness that makes it irreducible. So it's not about consciousness uniqueness. Like even if consciousness was something unique, it doesn't follow that it can't be reduced to something physical. It's that it's an elusive concept. It's incredibly hard to grasp. And that's another reason why there are tons, like the philosophy of mind is filled with attempts to define consciousness. It is a problem that has not yet been satisfactorily answered in the philosophical discourse. But that's like most of philosophy, right? There's no the answer to it. It's all about, I always think that philosophy is more about the questions and the reasons we give for certain answers to the questions. It's not about finding the answer. It's about trying to figure out what's the best reasons for what we believe. So even though most of us are conscious most of the time, and even though we can be introspectively aware of our conscious states, most of us cannot really say what consciousness is. So like what would you end up telling people if you're trying to describe what is consciousness, what the experience of being conscious is like? So what do you end up telling people? How do you describe it? Like if we went back to Jackson last week and you wanted to tell someone what is going on when you see a stop sign, how would you communicate that to your peers? And Nagel is going to say that the only way to do it is to tell them what it's like to see red. The features of consciousness cannot be expressed other than comparing it to somebody else who has the same conscious experience. So maybe be like, what is it like to look at a stop sign? You'd be like, well, what is it like to see an octagon? And then what is it like to see an apple? And then you put those two things together. So it's like, it's a very comparative way to explain the phenomenon that you have when you're experiencing a conscious event, like looking at a stop sign. So I'm going to give you a couple examples to try to explain this. So what is it to be a chair? So maybe it's to be a thing that you can sit on. And maybe you would say like to have something that has chairs that you can sit, or legs that you can sit on. But I remember in a previous video, I said that you can have chairs that don't even have legs. So what is it to be a chair, to be an object that you can sit on, that can hold a human being or an organism's weight? But if I were to ask you, what is it like to be a chair? I don't think you would give me an answer, right? That question is senseless. There's nothing that it is like to be a chair, and you wouldn't even ask that question. The reason is because chairs aren't conscious. We would only use the expression, what is it like, with organisms that have subjective states of experience. We use it to talk about those subjective states of experience. When you think there is something that it is like to be a chair, you're just attributing consciousness to a chair. You're attributing some kind of intentional behavior to the chair, and you're figuring that intentional behavior must be the result of conscious decisions. You're anthropomorphizing the chair. that kind of language applied to a chair just seems inaccurate. And for many people, they step outside the philosophy room and go hang out with your friends and be like, so what do you think it's like to be a chair? I think most people are going to look at you like you're crazy. Like there's nothing like it's like to be a chair. Chairs don't have any kind of experience. So why does Nagel focus so much on this question? What is it like? Because he thinks that consciousness is ineffable. Like you can't, it's no one can express what it's like or what consciousness is with language other than just saying what it's like, other than comparing it with other experiences. And he says that everybody has a hard time explaining what it's like because one, he thinks that consciousness cannot be explained by appealing to physical things, physical parts. And two, we cannot just show examples of consciousness in the world because of the problem of privileged access. So what he can tell us about consciousness is that it's just something that we all agree, which is that what it's like. And he hopes that this provides some sort of baseline so that we can even have a discussion. Because I think I mentioned this in a previous video. If we don't have any kind of baseline for discussion, then the discussion won't happen. So I think it was when I was talking about Searle, and Searle was saying, I don't have a definition, like a formal definition of understanding, but we can all jump on board of what understanding is. We all have some idea of what understanding is. And from this idea, this intuitive sense of understanding, we can start the discussion. And so that's kind of what Nagel's doing here, but he does provide a more formal definition than Searle does. So Searle's just like, think about what understanding is. It's not going on in the Chinese room. Nagel's saying, all right, think about what consciousness is. You probably can't figure out a way to describe it, but it's just what it's like to be something. So again, think about Jackson and the Mary example. What is Mary missing? She's missing the experience that it is like when you look at a stop sign. She doesn't know what it is like to look at a stop sign, or what is it like to see red. That's what she's missing, that conscious experience. Can we get any closer to the kind of experience Mary has than saying it is like what it is like when you are in front of the stop sign? Nagel says no. The closest we can do is say, okay, this is what it is like when I'm looking at a stop sign. So for Mary, when she looks at a stop sign, what is it like? It's like what I feel when I'm looking at it. So it's just comparing my privileged access to my conscious experience and saying that's what it's like for Mary when she looks at the stop sign. So that's where I'm going to end this video. And then the next video, I'm going to talk about the actual thought experiment.